welcome to yet another edition of E-Expressions. I have with me two wonderful people. They've served in the corporate sector. One of them is now one of the leading lights of the not-for-profit sector. The other has served in government, in the not-for-profit, and of course the corporate sector. And Mr. Chawla, the editorial director of the New Indian Express. Together, we're going to try and make sense of how the US elections 2020 will turn out and what impact they'll have on business. Mr. Mohandas Pai, who was chairman of Aaron Ventures, but critically was part of the Infosys team that made it the first Indian company to be listed on NASDAQ. So and of course, has an intimate knowledge of how the outsourcing policy works. And Mr. Myra, who both in the government and the corporate sector, understands exactly how much pressure American corporate interests put on American foreign policy. So I think we're going to have a very exciting discussion. May I start with you, Mr. Pai, and ask about what you feel about the current discourse in America. Where does the economy figure, and where does a country like India figure in the current debate on, Trump versus Biden?
Well, let me say this. I think what we're seeing in America is a battle for the soul of America. For a very long time, we have been fed the story of American exceptionalism. That America is an exceptional country. God only created the country, is ultimate in human civilization, born to rule the world, innovative. Much of it is true. It's the land of the free. But America is driven by contradictions. Is driven by many issues which are not being settled. The race issue is one that has not been settled. America's past, the American fascination for many things which you find objectionable today, and America's thinking of itself as the born to rule in the place of the British Empire, right? Now, what has happened? America's share of global GDP has come down a long way. The Soviet Union is gone. China has become a new hegemon with $15.5 trillion. And America's composition of population is changing. The white population, which ruled America for all till this time, will soon be overtaken by the Hispanics. And there's a rise of the left in America. So what Trump has come to show is the fault lies in America's society. And the fault lines have been there for a long period of time. America has outsourced its manufacturing, outsourced much of its industry, and American young people have a student debt of $1.5 trillion. There are many, many challenges about America. It is a great country. It can come out. So Trump has shown up America for what it is. There is misogyny. There is racism there. There is a hatred of the immigrant there. Everything is there. It is glossed over by the media. Now it's all up there for grabs. And then you have the rise of the new left in the United States. And now, as far as India is concerned in America, India is a peripheral player. India is in the periphery. But India is becoming more important because of China. Now, America has suddenly discovered that China has become a threat. China has hollowed out America's economy. It is the largest exporter into the United States, and it shut down its own market for technology investment by the United States. It shut out Google, shut out Facebook. All the digital monopolies are out, and China is trying to challenge them. And the Chinese investment in AI, advanced technologies, is certainly challenging America's dominance in the new world, in the world of technology, etc. And China's Belt and Road Initiative is spreading Chinese hegemony and control all around the world. So here is another great power. So we have seen in history that when great powers rise, when a new young great power rises, the old power does not yield. There's inevitably a battle. And in this battle, due to China's hegemonic intention in the South China Sea, threatening Southeast Asian nations, threatening Japan, and trying to grab Russia's land, India's coming to India's border and pushing India around, making Pakistan a colony and getting a warm water port. One of the great needs of the great game in the 19th century. You're finding that America is suddenly finding that China is a new hegemon and trying to create a quad with Japan, Australia, shifting its forces to the Pacific, investing more in the Pacific, walking away from Europe. And I think in that, India does have a peripheral role. But I think the important thing is India is not a prime player in the US elections. Even though we have 4 million Indians there, we're not a prime player. We are a peripheral player. And of course, they'll try to woo India. And we have a sense of self-importance. Our biggest issue is about the H-1B visas and immigrants. And that is a passing storm in my view. Because after the elections, I think if Trump comes back we will open up because industry requires it. They require it for the new digital monopolies. And if Trump doesn't come back and we have the Democrats come, they are open to immigration, and we will see many things.
Great. Thank you so much. That was such a quick and wonderful perspective on the changes that we've seen in the global, in the international world. Mr. Myra, may I have you next and ask about the hollowing out of the American manufacturing industry that Mr. Pai talked about. You were talking about pretty much the same thing being done to India. And how do you see in India and American relations playing out before this and after the elections?
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you, Kaveri and Prabhu and Mohandas on a very important subject. And you ask what would be the effect, if any, on the India-US business relationships if Mr. Trump were to win the election or someone else. And I'm going to say to you, it makes no difference at all.
Yeah.
You also mentioned earlier to me when we were talking about, well, there's so many Indian who are CEOs of very large companies, yes, especially in the sector that Mohandas knows very well, the information technology sector. And I'm going to say it makes no difference whether Indians run American companies or Americans run American companies. These are Americans, of course. And third, I would also say it's going to make no difference whether Kamala Harris of Indian origin becomes the next president, or Nikki Haley, who also is of Indian origin, becomes the next president. It will make no difference to Indo-US business relations. Why? Because there are some fundamental forces that have shaped the way US foreign policy has been made for decades, a century. And that is the role of business in influencing US policies, especially trade policies. Abraham Lincoln, just after the Civil War, said he feared what the Civil War, which had been settled in favor of having a federation, had unleashed. It had unleashed an industry to produce arms for both sides. And he said, what this industry is going to do to change the fabric of our society, I fear. Eisenhower, when he stepped down in January 1961, he had a very famous speech about his fear about the defense industrial complex on the shape of the globe, the US defense industrial complex on the shape of the globe. Then we come to the 1970s, where two trends, one coming out of business and economics, saying the business of business must be only business. This is from Chicago. And then we had Reagan in Washington saying, well, government is the problem. Government is not the solution. In other words, let business run things. And so, of course, we have a president of the US today who says because he's a businessman, yes, he can run the whole world and so on. So this is a very strong influence in the United States of the role of business in society and the necessity to let business actually have a free rein. Then the world will be better. Okay, this is ideology perhaps, but it's so strongly vested in the way US shapes its policies. So we come to another force is building up this, which is as Mohandas pointed out, the international relations for the last 20, 30 years have been in a sort of vacuum, which the US has sort of filled and had its hegemony on international multilateral organizations, the World Bank, the IMF, of course, and the WTO, all this time with no opposition, really. And so the trade rules have been very strongly made, and the investment rules, very strongly, the global trade rules, investment rules, by the US and by US businesses, very much so. And so we come to the point here where in the last few years, the investment community, which is really the business community of the US and the financial community of the US, have been able to get away by saying that there will be bilateral and multilateral investment treaties where investors can sue sovereign governments elected by their own people to say our interests are not being protected in your country. I mean, this is where we had come to. And you know, even in our country, there were people supporting this because sort of in terms of a very simplistic view of how power works and economies work, they said, well, this is good. if investments can go everywhere, in other words, make life very easy for migrant capital, go where it likes, come away when it likes, do what it likes when it's there. And we didn't realize that migrant labor, this is linked also to Mohandas' point about people who go somewhere else to work. We're not making life easy for them and all of those. So this is how the world has got shaped by money invested in big businesses. And the largest ones are multinationals out of the US. They don't even pay taxes in the United States. And US presidents have been trying to get them to say, if you're US corporations, pay taxes here. But they, by the dictum that, you know, the business of business is only business, and I care only for my shareholders' interests and not even national interests, that's where they are. Therefore, I'm saying that whether the person running a US corporation by its rules, by its norms, under its laws, is an Indian or not is going to make no darn difference to how much they can really do to help their motherland that they were born in perhaps, or their parents, that is India. And it also will make no difference whether the person next is of Indian origin, because that president is going to be under great pressure from business to always push business interests and US business interests in India. And I saw the consequences of this. For the 5-6 years, when I had 5 years, I was in the Planning Commission, and 2 or 3 years before that, that how much influence American thinking of both economics as well as their influence in these bodies that make the rules has had in weakening our structures. You pointed out our structures are hollow.
Yes.
But here we are. We signed the World Trade Organization agreements in 91 and became a very liberal open trade economy, as we said. And Mohandas would know this well. When the ITA was done by the WTO in 1996, the international IT agreement, India signed a year later. It was good because it said that please buy hardware at zero duties, because it enables software, which is the main thing required, to be available to everybody at low cost. China did not. China, even though joined the WTO a few years later, withheld joining the ITA for a full 12 years after that. And during that period, from 2000 till 2010-11, it built such a strong electronic component industry that it began to swamp the US with it. And now they're getting alarmed and saying, what happened? Why are all these hardware producers from China now taking over our country, our politics even, in the US? We were being too innocent. And we got convinced by the US to say, look, buy our stuff, it's high quality, and you'll have the best hardware to run your systems. In any case, most people, they said then, use US hardware, so it'd be good for you software producers to do that. Yes, it's very good for our software industry, but it wasn't good for our own manufacturing industries. And so our electronic industries became so weak that we, when I was in the Planning Commission, were getting alarmed that the import of electronic items into a variety of things, electronics goes into everything, was now catching up with our imports of oil and petroleum.
Yeah.
And we can't generate petroleum, that's part of the formations of the earth. But we can certainly, like China did, have produced our own electronics. Right. Why were we not? We got carried away with this notion that make it open, the trade open. In that case, it was supposed to be for the US, who thought they had the strongest hardware industry, but China didn't play by those rules.
Right.
So what should we do? We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. Mr. Pai, may I bring you in here? When Mr. Myra talked about migrant capital and migrant labor, as we all know, has to, follow the rules. And Infosys itself had to, ensure that it hired enough US workers to placate the US government. So clearly these rules, we as a country tend to play by the rules, by the global rules, and it doesn't necessarily benefit us. How does one solve this conundrum?
Kaveri, what I want to say is the Indian IT industry is adjusted a new threat of Trump to ban visas, etc. Most of the big companies are more than 50% local employees. Right. They build their big places in the smaller cities of the US, hide Americans, and they're finding they're much cheaper than sending Indians from here to do some work. Because what Trump and others forget is Indians went from here not to stay there as immigrants. They went there to do projects. I mean, we had data, we said 50% of people came back in 9 months. The other 20% came back in 18 months. Only 15-20% of people stay there for longer than 3 years. So we required a work visa, not an immigrant visa, but H-1B was an immigrant visa. because that's the way the US has constructed it. In fact, in mode 4 of the movement of natural persons, we wanted a different kind of work visa under negotiation in the US. It did not work. So I think India has adjusted to it. But the important thing today is, because of COVID, people have found you can work just from everywhere.
Right.
You don't have to be next to anybody, and you don't have to, you got to get all this fixation that you got to sit in a room and see a lot of people whom you can lord over as a source of your power. All that is gone. Everybody has been disabused. And today the visa has become less important because you can work digitally all around the world. Right. And of course, for India, having our people go there, work in the first world environment was very good, because, you know, like Narayanmurthy used to tell us that we live in the third world. So we have to create a campus and a workplace like the first world, because it delivered to the first world. Our mindset should be the first world. That's why you should, IT companies' campus are beautiful, much better than what Microsoft has in the US. And we need a set of young people to get them to adjust. But we've done it for 20 years. And today it doesn't matter so much. It's a very mature industry. It has its technology and everything else. But the big thing, what is important is, you know, Arun may like it, that today Indians are at the forefront of technology. They may not be at Infosys, they may not be at TCS, because, you know, they may be 2 years behind, but in the best IT companies in the world, in Google, in all the big companies, in all the R&D events, Indians are there. So the Indians have been trained up. Intellectual capital has come to the Indian mind. Most of them are Indian citizens. Some of them are in India. And let me give you some data. You'll be very happy. You know, America has 6 million software engineers. 1 million are Indians there. Citizens are green card holders. India has 4.5, out of which 2 million work for American companies. Out of 8 million working for American companies globally, 3 million are Indians. Of the top 10 software service companies by market value, 5 are Indian. Of the top 5, 3 are Indian. Of the 2 million employees in the top 10, 1.5 million are Indians. It has worked to India's advantage. And this is high tech, this is cutting edge, and we have brought it up because we came from the bottom, from small projects to big projects, and now we are the cutting edge in AI, in machine learning, etc. But we are not at where Silicon Valley is, for a simple reason. We don't have those universities, we are not funded enough, and we don't have the kind of R&D and the PhDs there. But today, symbiotically, Silicon Valley and Bangalore are linked together at the hip. Both work together. Most of the good startups there in high tech have their engineering office in Bangalore. And if you come to Bangalore, last year we had 500 companies who started off as startups using AI. I think that's tremendous what is happening in technology. But we lost out on hardware. Where hardware is physical, we did not invest enough. We started importing, and in many, the Indian industry has got a trading mindset. They don't want to invest for the long term. They don't want to spend on R&D, and they didn't want to do that. Only now in the recent past, the policies are changed, and hopefully because of the Chinese issue, electronics may come back to India. We make 250 mobile phones every year. We're one of the largest consumers of smartphones, 35 million a quarter. And I think that, you know, with Jio coming, with the telecom industry going up, we're going to see an upsurge and that manufacturing coming back. We still don't have a chip industry, even though we have the largest number of chip testers and designers in India. Over 250,000 people in the chip design and testing industry, and about 270 companies are in Bangalore itself. So very large things have happened in this area, but this H1B, the visa issue, we want it. We want an open society. If they shut us down and try to do something, we'll still survive, we'll still grow, and more of the jobs will come to India. Today,
well, I think, Kaveri, let me get into it, because we are diverting to different issues. We are going to Mohandas Pai is very expert. He knows all the strategies on visa. He's telling us all the things. But I'm little, as a journalist, I'm a little concerned about something that Arun was speaking about the same thing. You're different language altogether, but Americans work for themselves, not for anybody else. That's basically the mindset. They work for money, they work for commerce, and Indians, by the way, have provided them global connectivity to exploit India as well. Most of the Indians are working for America to make money out of India. And I'm a little surprised, because Infosys, I'm proud of Infosys, that these guys created a world-class system here. But I'm a little surprised, if I'm not wrong, please correct me. I'm a little surprised and sometimes saddened also when somebody says Infosys is now foreign-owned Indian company. Is that right?
Yes. 60% of the stock is held by foreign institutional investors.
So that is what happens when Indians work for Americans and Americans take over the Indian companies. That's what happened to the system. Let me complete now. Because I'm touching raw nerve, I know it. And because what happened, like HDFC is created by Indians, but on the greatest banking institution.
Yeah.
It's also now foreign-owned Indian bank. So what I'm talking about is the Indian, as Arun rightly pointed out, and I want to bring out here whether the election makes a difference to us or not. But the question is, will this election, the Indians who are helping the American economy to do what they are doing in the monopoly, digital monopoly they have created, it is because of the Indian minds, intellectual capitalism coming there. So what is happening that whatever is written in New York in terms of rules, formulation is implemented in New Delhi. That is what is happening. And whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, whether it's Clinton, anybody comes there, but the business rules and the policy rules are written in New York or Washington. They are implemented in Planning Commission. And what happened in 91, reforms happened, and because of the reforms, Infosys became foreign-owned company, HDF became foreign-owned company, and Indian international brands, we no more call it Indians anymore. Is that what the American mindset does to India?
You know, Prabhuji, I'll just make a few points, then I think maybe Arun can talk. You know, we have a weakness of capital. We don't have enough capital. And our institutions don't channelize capital to equity. LIC and the life insurance companies have a total balance sheet of 45 lakh crores. Do you imagine how much money they put into equity? Maybe 4 lakh crores, only 10%. Today, we have the Canadian pension fund come and invest $30 billion into the Indian market. $30 billion, the pension fund, taking the currency risk. LIC has still not made investment in technology startups or created $160 billion of value. So we have a financial sector.
I will interrupt you because when you start using LIC for funding bankrupt corporates, that is what happens. They can't concentrate on anything else. Various successive LIC people have been forced to give money to the bankrupt people. Look at how much money they owe.
But they make money in technology.
Because all the reforms are being guided, because the American principle of investment in everything which is golden in India, take over the companies which are doing very well. That is the American mindset, Harvard School of Thinking, or whatever is happening, that whatever India creates, take it over. Create your own LIC.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Indian life insurance companies, private insurance companies are not making money that LIC is making even today.
Yes.
All of them are making losses, and depending on investment which is coming from America or some other hedge funds. Yes. What I'm taking is that Trump is there or not there. American election, as Arun rightly pointed out, I just want to look at American mindset will destroy India or help India. Whether Trump or not, whether we will be able to have some say in Indian system. You have got only what investment in India? You have got about what, 45 billion direct investment from America? Out of 6.9 trillion direct investment from American companies rest of the world. And that investment, 90% in countries in like banks, telecom, and you're talking about telecom now. Telecom is sector in India going bankrupt. They owe lakhs and lakhs of crores of rupees to India, and you are getting money from abroad. So what I'm trying to say, we are talking about American election politically may not make any impact on India. But will Indians who are working for Americans, will they work for better economic deal for India, or what you call, give them more concession, don't impose capital gains tax, come here to invest them, take the hot money out? Will that model be working here?
Arun, I'll answer after you, Arun.
Thank you.
Arun, point of view.
I think I'd like to say that we want to build India. Okay.
Yeah.
I introduced the hardware, and Mohandas has also agreed we need to increase our hardware production in India. So let me say there are 5 segments of businesses in which we must grow, and what is our relationship with America. The first is the IT one, the software segment. I'm going to leave it aside. I don't think it drives our economy. It's made India an attractive place for people outside because companies like Infosys demonstrated we can do it better than the rest. That's very good. But in terms of the impact on our economy and the lives of people inside the country, it is small. Then we come to this entire segment called manufacturing, industrial products and consumer products which are manufactured. And these products, which is like the IT hardware, or as well as you can say machines and cars and scooters and white goods and so on, these things create a lot of jobs within our country, could create a lot of jobs within the country. And we haven't grown this segment enough. What is the role of, again, the business thinking of the US and business companies in this? Here I'll talk about the pharmaceutical industry, with which I was engaged firstly as a consultant to an American company in India who wished to somehow get the Indian government off this whole thing about saying that we want the freedom to, license something which is not being fully exploited, a patent, to make it available at low cost to people in India, Africa, or wherever it is. And they said, no, this is breaking the rules. This is stealing intellectual property. And India was in the doghouse for being a stealer of intellectual property in the world, right? Because of this. And we argued and said, look, the benefit of knowledge must be for everybody. So this business about owning knowledge, and that is yours, and for you to charge others for the use of it is a wrong principle. But American companies who were not producing things anymore in the United States, like Apple, producing this hardware outside or software also done by others, it owns the intellectual property. So in the price of the Apple phone, a very large percentage, and people have made their own calculations, 50%, 60% is IP. So a small group of people there is making a lot of money, made Apple into the first $2 trillion company in the world. It's not to do with the volume of its manufacturing. It's the monopolization of intellectual property rights. And this is again driven by, as I said, the WTO and the IT arrangement. This is the US companies, this is their agenda. So this is their strategy, and they will continue to do this. So we found this in the pharmaceutical industry also. And we said we need to produce generic drugs or low-cost drugs, which are public sector companies were producing. We used to produce vaccines in the public sector. We closed it down because there's a whole thing of producing things in the public sector, inefficient looking, producing, simple things. They're not doing high-tech research into pharmaceuticals. Close it down, get into something else. And then they wanted freedom to acquire our best companies, our best pharmaceutical companies, brownfield acquisitions. And we said, no, come and put investment into greenfield, increase the capacity here. Let our present companies operate and improve themselves. Please do this. But this was the argument all the time. No,
Arun, you're
backward.
Arun, I will stop you here because this is, Arun, I'll try to stop you here because there's an interesting discussion going on. Mohan will come here. What you made in the beginning, that these are all international company, technology company, they're driven by intellectual monopoly there. And these are the people who are trying to set the terms of trade also rest of the world. I would just want to ask, because Infosys, TCS, they were the pioneers when there were nothing like that at that point in time. There were no Google, there were no Amazon, there were no nothing like Apple. They were the kings of the global connectivity. Why couldn't they dictate the terms at that time? They could have dictated both TCS and Infosys together. Okay, these are the terms of trade. Why did you not exploit that opportunity?
Prabhuji, the question we got to ask is a very important question. The question we got to ask is, why do digital monopolies like Apple, Google, like Netflix, like Amazon, like Facebook, Twitter operate only in the US, not in Europe? The US is a $21 trillion economy. There's a huge technology market of $2 trillion. There's huge amount of risk-taking capital. There is technology assimilation. It's not there in Europe. These companies dominate Europe too. It's not there in Japan, which is a $5 trillion economy. It's a very unique situation. All our Indian companies are small companies. TCS is worth 120 billion. Infi is worth 60 billion. They are small companies compared to an Apple, right? And they don't get any revenues from India. India has got a small market. The American companies have a huge American market to themselves. They leverage that and go and conquer the world. They got America behind them. They got the power of the American president. What do we have? We have nothing to do. We are just coming from the bottom with nothing to our hand. We don't even have capital. We don't even put capital into our own companies. I mean, what do we do?
You had the advantage of entering in this field first time because you could have created why Apple is successful.
No, it is not possible.
Why young 25 years old, Zuckerberg is successful in 5 years.
No, it is not possible.
It was equally brilliant at that time. Why can't
it's not about brilliance. It's about capital, it's availability of market. Today, let me give you an instance. The US market in technology is $2 trillion. India's market is 30 billion. Can any company succeed here? You cannot succeed here. There is no market here. You got to first grow the market. Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu succeeded in China primarily because they shut out the world, and the Chinese market is 15.5 trillion. China invests $65 billion a year in technology startups. India invests 12 billion, out of which only 10% is Indian capital. Without capital, without a market, for us to create a global industry has been stupendous. Yes, they're not what you think they should be. I agree with you because everybody thinks they should be like Google. It cannot be. There is no Google in Europe. There is no Google in Japan. So let's be sanguine about it. And one question which you asked, I want to answer. Indians in American companies will work for their companies. They'll work for America. They will not work for India. India is a peripheral vision. All right. Let's be realistic about it. Kamala Harris, like people in Chennai, are jumping up and down pavilion. She cares 2 hoots for India. like Arun said,
Mohan,
America is
saying
America.
Americans don't bother about India. They want Indian market, but they don't want anything else. Okay,
Absolutely.
market at our terms and we will dictate.
Absolutely.
And all the people who are sitting in planning commission or Niti Ayog. If you go to Niti Ayog, I find out 190 consultants they have appointed, young boys and girls. They are all from Harvard and somewhere else in America, or they are related to politicians or IAS officers, and they think alike.
Yeah.
If you look at the Invest India website. Invest India website is like marketing America in India, not marketing India into America.
You're right. You're right. You're right. That's the reality.
Other thing is America is still not a nation. India is there's a debate about India, whether India is a country or a nation. India people feel we are a nation, but America is not a nation yet. But still their commercial interests, I'm just saying, in American elections, Trump is much more closer to India, or maybe Modi ji. No other president was so closer to Indian Prime Minister, because Indian Prime Minister was not that outreach, not there. Modi has done the outreach, he has reached there directly. So therefore, this election, after Trump goes or wins, doesn't win, Modi will have to find very difficult. Biden can't connect with Modi. Then,
okay, Arun, you want me to talk or you will talk?
Let him talk.
Go ahead. I think who is wishing to get clarification from you, but I have a few things to say, but I'll please let you go ahead.
No, I think, see, we have to be realistic about American politics and American politicians. For them, India doesn't matter. We are not important in the world at all. Let's be very clear. We're a small $3 trillion economy with a per capita income of $2,000. We can think what we are. And the way for us to grow is to make sure that we work with the global powers. We use their markets to grow. We give them access a little bit of a market. And we do what China did, hold them off at the door. Don't allow the barbarians to come over and carry you off. Take advantage of them and grow your economy. Once you become a $10 trillion economy, we'll have much more global clout. Because globally, what gives power is your economy and your military power. The military power we'll never have. At least let us grow our economic power. Look at what China has done. With $15.5 trillion, they are a very large economic power. You can't push China around. America is trying, but it's going to be difficult. So for us, coming from behind, because of bad socialistic policies for the first 50 years of our freedom, doing all the things wrong, and we have to fight. Let's be realistic.
Yes, thank you. Prabhu, you're putting it very well. There's a mindset and an idea about what is the best, smartest, world-class thing to do. And Indian industry and Indian economists started adopting an American idea as being the world-class idea, and we want to be respected and admired by them. I'm saying both economists and our business people also. And this is what has influenced the trajectory of Indian economy, as well as especially its industrial production for the last 30 years. And we come to this stage where we are worrying now about jobs and being able to stand up with our own defense. And China, what happened to China? And therefore to Mohandas, it was also in a similar position, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was in fact in a lesser position than we were. In 1991, India's machine tool industry and capital goods industry was larger and more sophisticated than China's. And now we are importing all our hardware and sophisticated stuff from where? Not even from the US, because the China has even overtaken them. So what happened? So I would say here, this idea that if you open your economy up, it benefits citizens is just half the story. It benefits consumers. And Indians can buy the latest this and that and the other. And we, the richer people especially, were the most delighted with this. You could get the better cars, the better clothes, brand names, and so on. And even the other people, aspirational, middle class, said, okay, now I can also buy the same sort of stuff. Of course, over the years, that same sort of stuff is all made in China with labels from the US. And so we're creating jobs in China. And then we say, to buy stuff, people need to have jobs and income. But we all this time haven't made our citizens employable or given them employment, so they can't even buy the stuff anymore. So there is this anxiety, and which is why the investors in India say, where's the market now? China has become strong because it created itself into a big market. To become a big market, you got to produce in your own country first. You got to stand up to the foreign investors like we used to do till 1991. We used to have phased manufacturing programs. Yes, I grew up in a company called Tata Motors now, a telco. We made trucks in India and buses in India, having learned from Daimler-Benz, and we exported them in those dark days before 91 against Daimler-Benz in Southeast Asia and in the Middle East and Africa. We said we can do it. We can do it. And we have lost that spirit because our people who are influencing policy, the business people so-called, who are influencing policy in India are traders. They will tell you how to.
I don't know. You have reminded me something else because Maruti was a success. Even now it is a success. It controls almost 50% of the market. It was created by Indians and it is market. Now they are going to drop the name Maruti and become Suzuki. So our brand being bought over in terms of, I don't know what, money changes everything. Tomorrow they will buy India. They don't call it India, don't call it Bharat, call it something else because we are giving you money. So the mindset what I'm talking about is that, do you agree with me, what both of you, that India, whatever US election or not, Indians have more American mindset in this institution. Do we need to purge the American mindset which pervades all over the country here in every institution, every decision-making process, so that India becomes self-sufficient and able to create and use the market to its own advantage? I'm asking both of you.
Yes.
You know, Prabhuji,
American in India.
Prabhuji, in Delhi, out of all the bureaucrats who rule this country and many political leaders, how many of the children are away in America? Almost everybody in power, every elite wants their children to go to America and not come back. Well, my son went to America. He's back here. He's working. And I like that because he said he wants to come back. They don't even want them to come back. And all the bureaucrats are very proud. Their children are in America. Everything is there. They exported out their future. So yes, you're right. We have this American mindset because we have not been a successful country. And we have this socialistic past where we derided ourselves. When we opened up, we did not sequence the opening up. Look at what China did when they opened up. First, they opened up agriculture, gave land to the farmer to grow and create a surplus. Then they opened up the borders, the coastal areas where they brought in SEZs to manufacture, to take advantage of the cheap labor and build the brands. Then they created contract manufacturing with the Chinese companies. They used the surplus to build infrastructure. Using the surplus, they subsidized the high-tech industry, created supply chain facilities.
I think we should not compare China with India because that's a different political system. We can't.
No, but we both have a billion people. They're the only source to compare. There's no other country you can compare. We are both big countries. We started off poor way back in 1970 or almost similar. Like Arun said, we are much better. What have we done since then? We opened up. We didn't support our industry. We brought in open policy without supporting. Maybe Rahul Bajaj was right. Rahul Bajaj was right. CPIM, those days were right. We should have sequenced it, but we carried away. Now, like you said, America rules New Delhi. American mindset rules Delhi. You're perfectly right, but that's political. But you know, there's a reality.
There has to be purge. There has to be purge of Americans. You know, here is what Zuckerberg comes here, he gets a priority appointment. Amazon comes, he gets all rolled out, red carpet there. All the tech people who are coming from there exploiting India's market, they get the treatment, and therefore the Indian mindset says, okay, my boss is meeting Google boss, so I should go and lay down there and also do this, help them to create the market. That's the mindset being created. Anything who comes from America gets the priority assignments here, priority darshan also immediately. So that's why the whole mindset changes.
No, I think Prabhu might say the red carpet is fine. In fact, the Chinese were much better than us at rolling out the red carpet in Beijing. And American businessmen used to say this, that, you know, when I go to India, I'm made to wait in some office and so on. When I go to China, the president rolls the red carpet in the Palace of People and receive. But they said thereafter they do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And this is Mahatma Gandhi's thing. I want to keep my windows open and get knowledge from everywhere, but I will not be blown off my feet. We got blown off our feet. And I want to say that, you know, in 47, 48, Gandhiji had this contest with Nehru, that we have to grow our own industries. They may be small, but grow our own industries, because then people will be producers, they can be consumers, build bottom up. And you know, the story you're telling, Mohandas, about China, different circumstances, but it was building the bottom up.
Bottoms up.
And Gandhiji said that, but we got so attracted with this idea about the big industry and top down, which led on and on, because the people who were telling us that our planning idea was wrong was Milton Friedman. He was one of the first economists to come and give a report to say, what is this idea of government playing a role? In India, we need government. And now, of course, America needs government. Everybody needs government. So we just lost it. We said, leave it to the business.
We're again coming back to American politics. I'm going back to it because 91 reforms started that time, and that's why there. So I was editor of Indian Express that time. It was just a coincidence because 1991 you started it. You had 3 finance ministers in the neighboring countries, India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. It was a coincidence that all the 3 came from the World Bank institutions at the same time. Was it to set the future in a particular way in this part of the country, in this part of the region? And since now, Mohandas and both of you, I'm asking you, supply side model became a mantra for success development at that time. And 35 years later, 39 years later, do you agree the supply side model at the same time by the World Bank pushed finance minister has brought us where we are today?
No, I think we could have done better. We could have done better. The demand side model, by creating more jobs, by creating labor intensive industries, by greater urbanization, the model that China followed in sequence would have been a great model. Agriculture is our strength. Labor is our strength. We are labor surplus. We are not capital surplus. We incentivize capital, not labor. If you have a garment factory, 50,000 people, the inspectors are there, they take bribe, they harass you. You will set up a 50,000 crore steel plant, borrowing money from the bank. You didn't even have to pay back the banks. You could siphon off money, become wealthy outside. You could be anything. And you got tax breaks for that. That's the kind of policy, Prabhuji. I think, that is terrible. We sequenced it wrongly. We did not place to our strength.
Correct.
We have
the supply side was supply, because Arun was there in Planning Commission, Motek was there, with the Singh Parivar at that time was known as all Motek Singh, Aluwalia, N.K. Singh and Manmohan Singh, this famous Singh Parivar which led particular supply model. I'll ask Arun, whether do you agree the supply side model which was created by that time? Now, well, you come to that, as Mohandas rightly pointed out, sequencing was wrong. With economics, we were taught there are 3 stages of development. You go from one sector to another to another. India is the only exception, perhaps, where the tertiary services sector can contribute 60% of the GDP, which should have gone from agriculture to manufacturing, manufacturing to services, but that's wrong. It has happened because of the supply side model only. You made cars more important, you made automobile more important, you made the services sector more important, financial sector more important. What do you think on this American model, American politics, forget it. American model of governance and model of economics, we have to get rid of it from India.
That's right. Well, you're calling it American model of economics because very largely you're right. Chicago School in terms of primacy of business and business looking after only its own shareholders wherever they are. And then Washington taking that business model and making it its trade model. I mean, that is really what we had to get over. Real economics for the real people, for real people in the real place, has to be building their lives. It has to be ease of living. Prime Minister said.
Not doing business.
Ease of doing business. And ease of doing business, we always do it the World Bank's framework, which is the ease of doing business from the perspective of a foreign investor. That's an American mindset. I was on a commission, independent commission appointed by the president of the World Bank while I was in the planning commission to look at what's wrong with that framework, because many countries, including China and India and South Africa, as well as some European countries like France, complained that that framework, which is, as you said, Prabhu, embodying a certain way of thinking and to judge whether you're good enough, and good enough for whom? Good enough for the
foreigners
from abroad, right?
World Economic Forum.
It's not helping the world, but it was so strong, the influence there, because there was no one to oppose, and China couldn't care. I mean, they made the point and they participated and said, change it or not, we're going to do our own thing. India's trying to climb that scale. And what are we doing? Improving the country with respect to foreign investments requirement. What are we doing for the sabziwala in the little place? I mean, he's earning. What are we doing for the person in the little industry in a village? Do we look at the ease of doing business of these people? And for them, living and business is the same thing. They live and work there. So we've got to change our framework. It's not with respect to investors from elsewhere. It has to be from our people's perspectives. To change this, as Manmohan Singh got me into the planning commission, said, why me, sir? I'm not an economist. He said, that is why. There's something going wrong with the economics, the way we're applying it. And I found it very tough, Prabhu. Thank you for saying that. I found it very tough against my colleagues and the economists. They said, oh, you want industrial policy? Do you want us to go backwards? I said, why do you think of the presentation of an idea which sounds to you similar to something else is the same old idea? I am saying get on to build things. That is the necessity, and learn how to do that. Let's not do it the same old way. There were very good things we did then, and I from my company Tata would tell you how to do it. We've got to have people who have the guts to do tough things in tough environments. Those are real industrialists. We don't want traders who then classify themselves as big businessmen and get awards for being the best businessmen. They're not industrialists. We need real industry builders. And industry builders do tough things. Will take a long time to produce a result, but they'll do them. And the American companies don't want this. They change the rules. We used to have in the policy phased manufacturing programs. It was accepted. If you came in as a German company in 5 years or 7 years, or like Suzuki came with Maruti, you had to build the local supply base. That's how it was built. It was a requirement. It was accepted under global trade rules. After 91, you daren't say that you've got a phased manufacturing program. So when I described how India would stage-wise build its industries, the word was used to me. A, you're calling industrial policy is a bad word. Second is a phased manufacturing program. The word PNP is not allowed. I said, don't call it phased manufacturing program. I'm saying build stage-wise. Please, let's look at how we would get cooperation from others who are willing. And I know the Americans are not so easily willing. But then let's find the people who will support us in building ourselves. If it's good for us, it's good for them in the long run too. We'll be another counter engine to China, which is what the US wants ultimately, but they'll just weaken us in the process of the way presently things are going.
Mr. Myra, may I just step in here and ask, we've had a Make in India policy since 2014, which is supposed to do primarily the same thing. Have we missed the manufacturing bus?
Absolutely. You know, the Make in India policy, as I've been pointing out, and I was asked also, though I left the Planning Commission, that, you know, having done the work in the Planning Commission, it's a lovely document, by the way.
Yeah.
It says you can't just talk about industry by itself. You've got to talk about trade along with industry. So in our ministry, we had the commerce and the industry as separate departments, and the commerce always had the primacy because it met the bigger people, it went out, was received on the red carpet and stuff.
Right.
So whatever it said is, you know, the Americans won't like it. So when the industry side said, we want a phased manufacturing program, the commerce wing said, no. This is wrong, it's backward economics and the Americans won't like it. So it was given up. So we said, look, you have to start with employment and job creation, a policy for that. Then you're going to realize you need industry. Then you're going to think about your trade policy as the last thing. You start with the trade policy and you're requiring industry to conform with your trade policy. And then no jobs get created. So start the other way. What can Indians do presently? I mean, they can do many things at the present levels of skills also. Encourage those industries and make them employed, not just employable. But if they don't remain employed, they're going to lose their skills and won't learn anything more. So this other American idea, which was in the ease of doing business, that, you know, unless you do away with all labor laws, it's not interesting to an investor.
And we have very little time left now. I want to rephrase the question again, because since we have to go back to the American elections, as both of you are agreeing, and I also agree, the American election doesn't make a difference to us, because American election don't influence us. American policies and American business do us. But I want to say, do you agree with the phrase that India, forget about American election, we have to de-Americanize Indian fiscal and economic policy or not?
Prabhuji, we have to create a policy which is good for India, putting India first. And in putting India first, there's a role for foreign investment. But like Arun said, we cannot be dominated by the needs of the foreign investor. If we're dominated by the needs of the foreign investor, we're going to create a country which people can come and buy over.
I want to put it America specific.
Yeah.
Earlier, you both have agreed that American has influence on us. I want to put it different because I want to looking as a journalist. I'm looking for a news in it. There is a need. Both of you are eminent industries. You have set up various good. You have done handled various business, and you are one of the person who created Infosys. So I want to be specific. Is there a need for de-Americanization of Indian thinking in terms of policy?
Yes.
Yes. But Arun, you also will agree, I hope.
Well, no, but I don't like the word de-Americanizing. I know for political reasons you must say that. But I'd say about get our own mind clear.
Yes.
That is what Mohan said in the beginning.
It might work for them. It might have worked for someone else another time. It will not work for us now. Let's find a model that works for us.
Well, American phobia is here. No? Anything which is American.
Prabhuji, we must learn how to make use of America for our own good.
Yeah.
Like Gandhiji said, we should not be blown off our feet by the winds from outside. Like the Chinese did, they used America. They got American market. The Japanese did, they used America. They got their market. They took all their money. Now they're giving it back. We got to be smart enough to understand what is good for us, what we have to do internally, and work with the Americans, take their capital, take the technology, export back to them, do business with them, and grow your own economy.
On your own terms, on their terms.
Yes.
We cannot become a colony of any country. We should not become a colony of any country. And our policy has been, like you said, if I go to Delhi, I'm treated like shit. I'm made to wait outside. Whereas, an American comes there with that big four, suited, booted, whatever it is, they're all straight inside. I'm made to wait. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Next time, you go with Zuckerberg next time.
No, I don't have to go with Zuckerberg. But, And let me tell you another thing. If I go in my kurta, even the guard spits on me. He pushes me aside because I'm not in a suit. And if I go in an ordinary car, they don't even allow me inside. If I go in a Benz, everybody salutes. And in Vidhan Sabha, let me tell you, in Vidhan Sabha, I seen a street dog can go walk inside. If I come in a kurta, the guard will not allow me inside. In my own capital, in my own city.
Mohan, I've been watching. Mohan, I'm just sharing aside because I watch social media quite frequently because I'm getting old sitting at home. What do you do? I see an American ambassador can gesture walking to anywhere without any problem. He tells every day. He describes his power he wields in the various political capitals.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, for him the doors are open everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. The American election may not different, but American ambassador is like a.
It's the largest economy in the world, the most powerful country. They rule the world, and we all bow before them. That's the reality.
Even their ambassador is like a god here. Like
yes, absolutely.
Get rid of that mindset.
Time for a last question. To both the gentlemen, Mr. Myra and Mr. Pai. What is the one thing that we need to change about our manufacturing policy, which can actually yield results in the short and long term?
See, Kaveri, I've thought about this, I've written about it, I put it into the plans that we made when I was planning commission, and thereafter, I have been kindly consulted by the industry ministers of the new government, and I put it there. Look, a competitive advantage you gain by using the resource that you have most in abundance and devise your production technologies to use that resource. If I'm sitting in Saudi Arabia and I've got petroleum under the ground in abundance, I will build industries and technologies to process that and then grow my industry. In India, the most abundant resource we have is people. And I have to have my production technologies which use people and not displace people. And we are getting this idea that, modern automation, and we are killing the lives of our people and killing India in the long run. It is entirely possible to devise technologies which make the most use of labor, and they need not be in the biggest companies. I mean, Nokia may not know how to do that, but there are many people, as we're discovering now, who are making the same sort of things at pretty high standards. They may not be sold in America, the brands, but our people will buy them just like the Chinese did. We've got to build industry by using people as the only appreciating asset that any enterprise can have. Appreciating meaning it's the only asset that can learn and improve its own capabilities. It doesn't depreciate if you keep it and nurture it. Machines, buildings will all depreciate on your balance sheet. So we are silly to put people onto a cost, profit and loss account and dispense with them when something goes wrong and keep on trying to worry about how to pay for the buildings and the machinery that we bought with loans. Please nurture your people. They are the foundation and will make India a very great country if both our business policies and economic policies are founded on this.
Right. Wonderful. Mr. Pai, are there any specific sectors that you would like to identify?
Yeah, Kaveri, I agree with Arun because we have to incentivize labor-intensive industries in the north of India, which is surplus in labor. The south of India is not surplus in labor, all right? That's why you had the migrant crisis that everybody went north. In the north of India, we got to incentivize labor-intensive industries. We got to give them capital. We got to get production up, tackle the Indian market, make them productive, and then urbanize. We have 7,000 small towns, not the big towns, 7,000 small towns. Why can't you invest in them to urbanize those small towns? Because they will be the engines of growth with good infrastructure and supply chain. But in the north of India, in the south of India, where fertility is already down, education is already up, we can have more automation, we can have the industries of the future. The industries of the future, which is electronics, and not assembly, which is electronic, sophisticated manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing, which is manufacturing of drones, which is manufacturing of robots, etc., can be in the south of India. And about 10, 15 years, we can build it up. So when the north also comes up, because they're using the surplus labor, we can have an all-India market. So we got to have differential this thing. And last point, we have to make sure that the disincentive for investment in India goes away. For example, if I invest in a startup, long-term capital gains after 2 years is 28%. If I go to the stock market, it's 10%. Why can't you make it 10% here? So I think we got to change tax. We got to incentivize labor-intensive industries, focus on jobs, and do it in the north of India as special economic loans for labor-intensive industries. And that is the idea that will take India forward.
Wonderful. Thank you both, gentlemen. I think it was a masterclass in knowing where we went wrong and in knowing what we can do to fix it as well. Thank you, Mr. Myra. Thank you, Mr. Pai. Thank you, Mr. Chapter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.